In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps to set up GeoDjango and then build this example app. The idea is you can move this point around on the map and the results at the bottom will update with the locations in your database that are closest to that point. GeoDjango needs a database that supports spatial data and queries, so I'm going to use Savala to set up a Postgres database with the PostGIS extension for this app. I will also use a Docker file in this project, so deployment to Savala later will be easy. Now let me go over to my code editor and we can get started with this GeoDjango app. Okay, so to begin, let me show you what I have. I'm going to use Docker for this because I find that these dependencies that you have to install, so GDAL being the most significant of them, don't always work with local environments depending on what you have set up. So it's best to just put them in a Docker image so it's consistent. So you know it's going to work on your local environment and when you go to deploy it to somewhere like Savala. So this is just a basic Docker file for Python with the addition of installing the dependencies that I need for GeoDjango. And then also I have commented out the things that I would have if I were running this in production, but since I'm just running this in a development environment with Docker Compose, I'm able to leave out quite a few things. So I have an app and a project set up already. I have settings.py. So the first thing I need to do inside of settings.py is add the Django contrib GIS app to installed apps. And then once I do that, I can think about setting up a database. So I'll go over to Savala and I'll create a new database. And the idea is this needs to be a PostgreSQL database because PostgreSQL has PostGIS. You can use other databases, but I want to use PostgreSQL. And then here I'll click Enable PostGIS extension. And then everything else I can just leave as the default and I'll create database here. And while I wait for the database to be created, I'm going to go back to my project, actually the app here, and I want to add a model. So here in models, the first thing I need to do is I need to change the import for models here. So because I'm using GeoDjango, I don't want to use this normal models that you import from Django.db. Instead, what I want to do is I want to import from Django.contrib.gis.db, and then I want models from here. And it's going to work in the same way for all of your regular models, but it's also going to work for anything that uses GeoDjango. So I want to create a model called location, and this is obviously going to hold locations. So models.model. And I'm going to start by creating a character field, which is just a normal model field. So this will be a max length of, let's say, 100. And then I want to add a point. So this will be the coordinate for this location. So this is going to be models.point field. So this will be like the latitude and longitude of it, or the XY coordinates, depending on how you think about it. And I'll just set this null equals true and blank equals true. And then I'll also have a polygon. So this polygon will represent like an area. This will just be as an example in the video. I'm really going to focus on points, but I'll show you how polygons work as well. So I'll do models.polygon field, and then I'll also set this null true and blank equals true. And then what I can do is I can define a dunderStir method that will return the name of the location. So return self.name. Okay, so now let me go back over to Savala. Let me see the progress of my database. It looks like my database is ready. And since I'm doing this in my local environment, what I want to do is I want to make my database available to the public so I can access it from my local machine. So I'll go to networking over here, and then under external connection, I'll hit enable. And then I'll go back to the overview, or actually I can just go here. The external connection URI is here. So I'll just click on that. And then I'll go back to settings.py. So let me find the setting for my database and I'll just show you what it is here. So I'm using the env.db. So this is from Django Environ. That's what I have set up to work with my environment variables. So I don't have to put the configuration values inside of settings.py directly. So what I have here is my env has all of the values that I need. So for the database URL, I want to update the database URL from SQLite to this Postgres one that I just created on Savala. And what I want to do is instead of having Postgres here, I want to have PostGIS. And that will tell Django Environ to use the correct database engine when it is connecting. So if I use Postgres, it's going to connect to it like a regular Postgres instance. But if I use PostGIS, it's going to connect to it and enable it to use the features that come with PostGIS, which I need for GeoDjango. So now that I have everything set up, let me go ahead and run make migrations. So I'll do docker compose run. This is app bash, right? I have that app in my docker compose. So I'll run this, and then I'll do python manage.py make migrations. Okay, so we created the location model, and then I'll do python manage.py migrate, and then this will add everything to my actual database that I just created. So I'll wait for this to create, and then I'll go back to the database and look to see the tables inside of the database. Okay, so everything should have been migrated. And actually, before I go over to the database, I want to create a super user because I'll be using the admin dashboard. So manage.py create super user, and I'll just put in some information here. So Anthony as my username, and then I'll just add in the rest of the things here. Okay, so the super user is now created. Let me go back over to Savala. I'll go to Studio here. I'll click on it. And then here I see my app location table. And then of course I see all the other tables that come along with Django. And because I'm using PostGIS, there are some other things in here that you may have noticed. So like spatial reference, USGAZ, and so on. So these are required for both PostGIS and parts of Django. So it's a mix of the two. And then if I go over to my user table, I should see the one user that I just created. So Anthony there. So I can see everything here on Savala, which is nice. And I'll come back to this once I create something in the database. So let's go back over to the code. And the next thing I want to do is I want to set up the admin dashboard to work with this location model that I just created. So I'll go over here and I'll import that location model. So from.models, import location. And I also want to import the GIS model admin. And the reason why I want to do this is because it's going to give us this cool map that we can use to set up points and polygons, which I'll show you in a second. So I'll do from django.contrib.gis.admin. I want to import the GIS. This is the GIS model admin. That's what it's called. And then I want to register my location model. So I can do @admin.register. I'll pass in the location model. And this decorator is decorating a class. And this is going to be called location admin. And this needs to inherit from GIS model admin. Okay. And then I don't think I need to add any values here, like any settings for location admin. I think the default is okay. So what I'll do is I'll exit out of the bash, and then I'll run docker compose up. So docker compose up. So my app gets turned on. And now we see that my server is running. So I'll go over to my browser and I'll go to localhost 8000. And that's all working. So I can go to the admin and log in. And here I see location. So I'll click on locations, and I want to start by adding a location. So I'll click add location here. And we see I get this map. I actually get two maps. So one for point and one for polygon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this map. Looks like I'm starting in Europe somewhere. And I'm going to select Paris. Okay, so here's Paris, and I'm just going to place the point there. And then what happens is when I save this, this point's coordinates will be saved. And I'll name this Paris. And then for the polygon, I can do a similar thing, but instead of just one point, let's go back over to Paris. I'm going to draw a box around Paris, a really big box here. And then when you're done, you can connect it. So it'll just snap back to the beginning. And then that represents a polygon. So this covers all the area inside of the polygon. And the idea is you can do things like query to see if a point is inside of a polygon. You can see how far the point is away from a polygon. You can do stuff like that. You can see if two polygons are overlapping. You have the options to run queries like that. I'll show you one with points. But the point of creating these things like points and polygons is then you can use that information later in your queries to do something useful. So I've created Paris. What I'll do is I will add another. So let me pick another city in Europe. So let me zoom out and look. I think I want to do London. So I'll go over to London, place a point, and then I'll just put London as the name. And then I'll do the same thing for the polygon. So let me navigate over to London, and I'm just trying to move over there in the most efficient way. And I'll just put a giant box, and it doesn't have to be a box. It's just any polygon. So if I wanted to make it like that, I could, although I don't think that is considered London anymore up there, but that's fine. So I'll just save this. And now I have a couple of locations in the database. And you know what, just to make sure we have some good data, I will add one more location. So let's zoom out. And for this one, I'm going to choose somewhere in Spain. Let's do Madrid here. And I'm going to skip the polygon. I'll just use the point because that's what I'm going to use for the example. And I'll save. So now I have these 3 locations in the database. So if I go over to Savala again, to the database studio, I can go to the app location, and we see I have these 3 rows, Paris, London, Madrid, and we see we get these hexadecimal values for point and polygon. We see null for Madrid for the polygon, but this is just how it's stored internally when you create a point or a polygon. So it's hard to just read this and understand what it means, but of course you can visually see when you go to the admin dashboard where these correspond to. And if you were to go back and say any point, that information is going to persist. So I'm going into London, and we see the dot is still there. It's just really zoomed in. But if I zoom out, this is still London, and the polygon here is still this giant polygon that I put around London. So everything looks to be working correctly. So let's go back over to the code. And what I want to do now is I want to create a couple of views. One view is to display everything, like the results that I'm going to have. And then another view is going to be used for HTMX, just to return the results, just to keep it simple. So I'm going to create an index view. So return render, and then the first argument should be request, and the second is going to be index.html. And I'll create another function. I'll call this results. So this will be request as well, and then return render request, and then this will be results.html. So pretty simple. Let me go ahead and create a templates directory, and I'll create those 2 templates. So the first template is index.html. And the second template is results.html. Inside of index, it's going to be a regular HTML file. And then results is going to be something a little bit different, which I'll show you in a second. So let me close the files I no longer need. And then let me create the URLs for these views that I just created. So I'll say from app import views. And then I want to create an index. So this will just be views.index. Name index, and then also I want path results. This will be views.results, and then the name will be results here. And I want to keep the quotes consistent, so that will be results like that, and then that would be single quotes. Okay, so I have the index set up, and I have results set up as URLs. And now what I want to do is I want to go over to index. And what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to add a map. So I'm going to bring in the CSS and the JavaScript for the map. So this is called leaflet. I'll bring in the leaflet CSS, and then I'll also bring in the leaflet JavaScript, just like that. And then I want to put a height on the map because the default's not that good. So I'll just put hash map here, so the ID map, and then I'll just make the map 540 pixels. Okay, and then inside of the body, I need to add a div that will hold the map. And then I have some JavaScript that I can bring in. So this controls setting up the map. So script tags here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called map. I'm using the old style variable here in JavaScript because that's what they use in their documentation, but you might want to use const or let, but I just want to keep things consistent. And then I need to add a tile layer. So a tile layer is like the actual map information. So like, the visual locations and everything, because without that, leaflet just is a way of like moving around some surface that doesn't have anything on it. So the tile, the actual thing that you see on the map, needs to be added, right? So I'm just adding these, and this comes from OpenStreetMap. And then I'll be able to see it. So let me go over to my app and I'll go to the index, and we see page not found. And I think it's because my URL, this shouldn't have a slash. It should just be empty. So let me refresh again and wait for my server to restart. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we see a map, right? So it's centered basically at the equator and at the prime meridian. And then I can move it around and I can zoom into any particular location. Okay, so the idea behind this app is I want to basically place a marker somewhere, and I want to get instant results telling me what the closest location to that marker is. So I'll have the results down here under the map, and then I'll place the marker. So I need to set up the marker. So there's some more JavaScript to handle the marker. So I'll just bring that in. I don't want to focus too much on the JavaScript stuff because this is something you can just grab from the leaflet docs. But basically I'm setting up a marker here saying that it's a draggable marker, and then it will auto pan, meaning like as I move the marker around, the map will also shift, and I need to add it to the map. And then what I'll type out is what happens when I move this marker. So I'll create an event listener, and I'll do marker.on, and then drag in is the event that I'm listening for. And then I'll create a function to handle this. And then using the same style so far, I'll say lat long equals marker dot get lat long, just like this. So this will give me the coordinates of wherever I drag the marker. And then I just want to alert that so we can see it. So alert lat long. And now let me go back and refresh. So now we see I have this marker, and I'll just move it somewhere, and it doesn't fire. So let me see why this event listener is not working. So marker on, and I believe it is drag end. So let me look at the console, and it's just get lat long is not a function. So that's where I messed up. I think there shouldn't be an O here. So let me try again and refresh and drag. Okay, there we go. So there's no O in long. It's abbreviated LNG. Okay, so if I move it anywhere in the world, it's going to show me the lat and long coordinates. Okay, so that's great. So the next thing I want to do is I want to set up a view. So this view results to basically take in a lat and long and then determine how far away all the other points are in my database. And then I'll return the results as the closest points to whatever the marker is, the lat and long. So I'll start by defining like lat. I'll do floats because it's a floating point number that's coming in, and then request.get, and then lats. And I'll do the same thing for long, and I'll just abbreviate it the same. So LNG. And then what I want to do is I want to create a selected point. So what I need to do at the top here is I need to import a point from django.contrib.gis.geos. I need to import points so I can create a new point. And then down here, I'll say point equals, and then the point class. And then the tricky thing here is it takes in the longitude first. So longitude is actually like the X coordinate. So this is the distance going in the horizontal direction from the prime meridian. So that's the longitude. And then the second argument is going to be the latitude, which is the Y distance from the equator. So it's a little weird. It's just because it's XY. XY is standard for points. But when we say latitude and longitude, we say latitude first. So just keep that in mind. Put the longitude first under point here and latitude. And then you need some SRID. This SRID kind of represents how these points are interpreted. There are different styles, but I'd say 4326 is the standard. All right, so now that I have that point, I can run a query. So I'll just call this locations as a variable. So locations equals, and I'll do location.objects.annotate. And what I want to do is I want to get a distance. So first, let me import the distance function. So from django.contrib.gis.db.models, also .functions, I think. I want to import distance. And then here I can call the distance function, so distance, and then I want the point-based distance, and I want to pass in the point, right? So this will calculate the distance between all the points in my database and the point that I just created, right? So this location objects, this is the main query. So it's going to get all the locations. It's going to add like a new result called distance. And the idea is it's the distance between point, the point in my database, and the point that I just defined here. If I wanted to make this more clear, I can say like marked point or selected point, but just know this first point is the point in the database, and the second point here is the point that I just defined right above. And then once I have that annotate, I can do an order by. So I'll do order by distance. And I want to limit my results to 5. I only have 3 in the database, but just in case I want to add more, I'm going to limit them to 5. So the 5 closest points to everything. Then what I can do is I can just pass the locations to the context. So I'll do locations here. And then inside of the results template, what I want to do is I just want to loop over all those locations. So for a location in locations, in for here, because I'll need that. And I just want to create a div. So let's say div class location. And I want to have the location name. So location.name for each result. And then I'm going to have, let's say, the lat and long. So lats will be location.point.y. So remember, latitude is the y coordinate. I need to convert this to something that's easier to read. So float format, and then 2 decimal points. And then I'll do the same thing for longitude. So I'll just copy this and I'll change this to longitude. This needs to be an X, but everything else is the same. And then finally, I'll put the distance between the mark point and the location that is appearing in the results. So this would be location.distance.km for kilometers. And then I can add this float format onto the end as well. And that should be it. All right, so let's test this out. Let's go to the app and let's go to results directly. So we're gonna do /results question mark lat equals let's say 0, 0 and long. So ampersand long equals 0.0. So let's run that. Let's make sure this works first. We see locations not defined, so that's easy to handle. I just need to import it. So from.models, import location here in views.py. So now let me try again. Once the server restarts, I'll be able to see something. And here we see. So Madrid is the closest place to 0, 0. And then Paris follows that, and then London. So the results are appearing just fine. So what I want to do is I want to bring in HTMX so these results appear automatically under the results here. So let me go ahead and do that. So first, I need to bring in HTMX, the library, and it's really easy to use if you've never used it before. So I'll just import it up here using the script tag at the top. And then I will create a div to hold the results. So this will hold the results under map. So results here. And using HTMX, I define some attributes. So hxget. So this will send a get request to results, which is the view that I created. And then I'm going to create a custom event so I can use the marker on and trigger HTMX. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this event is going to be triggered by something called point update, which is something I just made up. So it can be whatever you want. And then I'm going to end up passing some values. So hx vals, this will be passed in the get request that HTMX is going to send for me. And what I want to do here is I want to say that this is going to be JavaScript. And then it's going to be lat that I want to pass. So that will be event.detail.lat. And then I want to pass a longitude as well. So this will be event.detail.long, LNG. Okay, so that should be it for the hx vals. And now that I have that, I can go to my marker on, I can remove the alert, and I can do HTMX long.trigger. And I want to trigger on results. So I'll just pass in results as the first argument here, the ID results. I need to pass in the name of the event that I want to trigger on it. So point update. And then I need to pass in the event details. So these arguments here that I'm about to pass in end up being interpreted in HX vals. So here I want to pass lat, which will be lat_long.lat. And then I want to pass in long, lng, lat long.lng. Okay. And I think one more thing I want to do is I want to fix the styles for results before I get there. I know it's not going to look right. So I'll just do display flex on the results. Okay, so that should be it. Let's go back over, refresh. Let's see, I'll move the marker somewhere and we get nothing. So let's go ahead and quickly debug it. So we get this 404 from results. And I believe the reason is because I don't have a trailing slash here on results. So I'll just add that trailing slash and then I will try again. So I'll move it. And we see I get the results here. So I can close this. We see that Madrid is closest, followed by Paris and then London. So if I go inside of Europe, it'd be a little clearer to see the results working. So I just move the marker inside of France. So that means Paris is going to be closest, followed by London and then Madrid. If I move it up closer to London, we see that this updates as London being first, then Paris, then Madrid. And if I move it down closer to Madrid, then we get Madrid first, then Paris, and then London. And of course, I can probably get it to where Madrid is close, followed by London, and then Paris, just by playing around with the marker. And I can do that any location. So I can put it somewhere in the US, and we see London is closest to the center of the US. I can move it here somewhere in Russia, and it looks like it's still the same. How about down here in Australia? Then Paris is the closest, followed by London and Madrid. So you can just move this anywhere and the results will immediately update for you. So as you can see, working with GeoDjango is pretty simple. Of course, I had to bring in this map and everything to get it to work. I'm not building the map from scratch, but the queries though, this is pretty simple to use. So once you have those dependencies defined in your Docker file or installed in your local environment, and then you set up things like I showed you in this video, you'll be able to use GeoDjango just as easily and then use all the features that you need. And if you're interested in creating your own GeoDjango app and database on Savala, you can sign up today and get a free $50 credit. Also, if you want to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe to this channel.